everybody, it's Lori again, and welcome back to my kitchen. You guys, I would like to share a recipe for ham and bean soup with you today. I will have Roger write it up over here, but to begin with, you will need 4 cups of dry beans. I really prefer great white northern beans or a white bean of your choice, okay? I'm just using white beans today. So you will need 4 cups of those and approximately 3 quarts of water in a heavy kettle. We are going to do a primary, like a pre-soak or a quick soak with these beans. I always soak my beans before canning them. That's just how I prefer doing things. But you also know how much I love to create recipes for creating your soup right directly in the jar instead of cooking it all together in a pot and then ladling that finished soup into jars. I create my recipes to just be put directly into the jar, and then as it cooks in the canning process, it just creates this wonderful soup. So I would like to share my recipe for ham and bean soup with you guys today. Roger will, like I said, put it up over here. So for Lori's ham and bean soup, we'll have those beans soaking and ready, but then we will need 4 cups of chopped ham, just in little bite-sized pieces. You will need 2 medium chopped onions. You can use a large one or 4 small ones. It's just up to you. Doesn't have to be exact, but 2 medium chopped onions. You will need 5 stalks of celery. Then you will need a little bit of parsley, and you'll need approximately 3 quarts of broth of your choice. Now, I personally, for this recipe, like to use my homemade ham broth. The way that I make my ham broth is after I've cut all the meat off of my ham, I'm left with this wonderful ham bone. And I also sometimes cut off some of the areas of skin and the big fatty areas, you know. And I throw all of those things, the bone, the extra fat pieces that I've cut off, and the skin pieces, I throw that into a big pot and cover it with water, and then I just boil it for a couple of hours, and it comes out just amazing, amazing ham flavor and a wonderful ham broth. Now, if you don't have your own ham broth, have no fear, you can use whatever broth of your choice, okay? I would suggest possibly chicken. It's a lighter flavored broth, and the ham that is going to be in this soup, this finished soup project, or in each one of your jars, will flavor that chicken broth with the ham flavor, and it will be absolutely fine and wonderful. Okay, so I'm going to page you down here. I have got about 3 quarts of water in my heavy kettle, and to that I am going to add my 4 cups of dry white beans. Now what I'm going to do, and this is just cold water, no salt in it, just plain water, no salt. I'm just going to put my beans in there. I'm going to bring these to a boil, and then I'm going to lower them to a simmer, and I'm going to simmer these beans for an hour. All right, so I'm going to get those in there, going to get those boiling, and I'm going to simmer them. And after they are simmered, I will come right back and show you how to assemble this amazing soup right in your jars. Okay, so I simmered my beans for 60 minutes. And then what I did is I drained the water off in a, I poured them into a colander, drained the water off, and I just rinsed them with cold water just to cool them down so that they're easier for me to handle. All right, so now we are going to start loading our jars. And in my recipe, I did fail to mention that an optional ingredient for this is 1 pound of cooked and crumbled bacon, which I am going to add to my jars. But let's start out with our parsley. You just want to go ahead and put in 1 teaspoon of parsley to each quart jar. Then you are going to equally distribute your chopped onion throughout each one of your jars. All right, and the same with your celery. Now, I had fresh celery, but I do have some home dehydrated celery, and it's back from 2022. And so I've really been trying to use this up. So I'm just going to use dehydrated celery. You can go ahead and use the fresh, like I said, 5 stalks of chopped celery. So I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to eyeball my celery because mine is dehydrated. But equally distribute your celery throughout your jars. And then if you choose to add that optional bacon, go ahead and equally distribute that throughout your jars. And like I said, this was 1 pound of cooked and crumbled bacon, just equally distributed through our 7-quart jars. And now we're going to go ahead and we are going to add 1/2 cup of our soaked and parboiled beans. And then we are going to go ahead and add 1/2 cup of chopped ham per jar. Now I do cut my ham in pretty small pieces for this soup recipe, just simply because it is soup, and the smaller you can cut your ham, the more it's going to be equally distributed so that everybody gets a few little bites of ham. If you leave them in large chunks, you know, it's not going to go as far per person with great big hunks of ham in here. So I do cut these fairly small, and 1/2 cup of that per quart jar. Okay, and that's all there is to it. Now, I do have a few extra ingredients. Obviously I have extra ham, and I also have extra beans, okay? Now today, I'm gonna grab a towel here. Today, you guys, I would like to talk to you about soup canning times, okay? Soup canning times, let me just back up a little bit. Canning is all about density, okay? It's about how dense the product is packed into the jar. And my best, I guess, example of this is take meat, for example. Meat is pressure canned 75 minutes per pint, 90 minutes per quart, okay? Corn, kernel corn. Now that's a vegetable, completely different. You know, meat is meat, vegetable is vegetable, right? But corn, kernels of corn settle into your jar so densely, so tightly that they are actually canned almost at meat times. A quart of corn, so a quart of meat is 90 minutes, a quart of corn is 85 minutes. And the reason why that is not because of the food item, it's because of how dense they are packed into the jar, into the canning jar, okay? So now think about this, density. When you have something that is really dense inside of your jar, it doesn't have a whole lot of freedom of movement to move around. So when it's boiling, those bubbles and that boiling action doesn't move that food around a whole lot, okay? So it takes a lot longer for the heat of the pressure canner or the hot water bath to reach the center of the product in the jar and penetrate through it for long enough, okay? And that's simply because that food item can't move around freely in the jar. So those are regular canning times. Now, what I would like to share with you today is what we consider soup times, okay? And soup times have definite rules. So don't confuse this that, oh, I'm calling this a soup so I can can it at soup times. There are definite rules to this, and I will share them with you today. A soup time can be used, and it's a reduced time from meat or whatever. It can be used if your jar is only 50% full of solids, and that can be beans, meat, vegetables, a combination of all of those, or only one of those. If you want to fill your jar just 50% full of meat, you can use soup times. But the other part of the rule is it can only be 50% full of solids, and the remainder of the jar has to be a clear broth or water. So no thickening agents like clear gel can be used, no dairy, no milk, no cream, no cheese, okay? It has to be a clear broth that boils easily and allows that heat to fully penetrate quickly. All right, now in this recipe that I just shared with you today, you can see that my solids, you know, my onions and celery and beans and ham and bacon, only fills 50% of the jar. I'm going to use my home canned broth, my homemade broth, to fill the other 50% of the jar, and it qualifies for soup times. Now, that's because in this canning process, all of these ingredients down here have plenty of room to boil and move around inside of that jar, and the heat can penetrate very quickly and very easily. So soup canning times for pressure canning is 60 minutes for pints and 70 minutes for quarts, okay? Now, hot water bath time wouldn't change at all. It would still be 3 hours hot water bath for your pint or your quart size jar. But if you're using a pressure canner, you can use the reduced soup time for this recipe as long as you have packed your jars in the amounts that I have stated. A half cup beans, a half cup ham, and your solids are not over 50% of the jar, okay? All right, so we're just gonna go ahead and we are gonna go back around and we are going to fill these jars to 1-inch headspace. Oh, I better tip you down. Complete filling your jars to 1-inch headspace with the broth of your choice. Now, I'm not sure if I have enough broth to go all the way around and fill my jars, so I'm just gonna fill them about halfway at this point in time until I know for sure that I have some of this good ham broth in each and every jar, because I want that flavor throughout all of my jars. But I don't know, like I said, if I have quite enough to complete filling my jars. So this is just how I stretch the flavor throughout all of them. All right, now I'm going to go ahead and just put a little bit more in each jar to equally distribute what I have left. All right, that's it for my ham broth. I am plumb out. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take just plain water, and I'm going to finish filling the jars with water to that 1-inch headspace. All right, guys, I'm going to run and get some more water. I'm going to clean up my area, and then we'll complete filling our jars. I will be right back. All right, I got my area cleaned up a little bit, and I got a little bit more water, so I'm going to complete filling my jars here. Alrighty. This one looks like it needs just a touch more. That looks a little low too. All right, now I'm happy with those. And just like any other canning application, we are simply going to take a clean, wet washcloth and wipe the rims of those jars and place our lids and rings. Now, everything is pretty much room temperature, so I'm using a room temperature canner. And into the canner they go. All right, and we have done our soup right in the jar. Now, let me clarify just one last time, please, because I don't want it to be confusing to anybody. Soup times, reduced soup times, pints 60, quarts 70 by pressure canning. Soup times can be used when you have 50% solids and the other 50% is clear fluids. Now again, no thickening agents. So like for a stew, this will not work. If you have a thickening agent like cornstarch or clear gel or tapioca in there, it disqualifies it for soup time. If you have any dairy, so that this is a cloudy type of broth, any dairy product like milk, heavy cream, cheese, okay, that disqualifies it from soup times. But as long as you have 50% solids and the remaining 50% is clear broth or water, you can use these soup times. All right, so I'm going to get this into my canner. I am going to can these quarts at soup time, 70 minutes PC. Now, if you would like to hot water bath this, you would hot water bath either pints or quarts for 3 hours. So I'm going to get this process started and then I will come back when it's completed and my canner has cooled down and show you the amazing results. All right, so I got through my 70-minute soup processing time and I allowed my canner to cool off so that I could remove my weight safely, and then I just slightly cracked open the lid and allowed another 10 minutes. And then I moved it back further and allowed another 10 minutes. And I just always like to remind people to allow your canner to cool down long enough. I know that we're all in a hurry, and particularly like me right now, it's getting pretty late at night and I'm tired. I just want to be done and I want to go to bed. So sometimes we get in a rush. But to avoid siphoning issues, it's really, really imperative that you allow your canner to cool off. Now, if you're hot water bathing, after you're done with your process, turn off your burner and just allow your jars to remain in the water for an additional 10 or 15 minutes. And what that does is that just allows the canning water and the food product to cool off just a little bit so that when you lift it up out of that water, you're not going to have siphoning issues where the cool air is pushing that hot food product up and out from underneath the lid. Same thing with your pressure canner. So anyway, I have allowed proper time for this to cool off, and so I'm going to remove the top very carefully and show you our beautiful bean and ham soup. Alrighty, so here we have our first jar, and you can see, some of that bacon that I added is floating at the top, which is absolutely fine and normal. Look at how wonderful that is, you guys. I don't know if you can see those beans. They hold together so well, even with like the pre-soak. Wonderful, superb lids. But anyway, even with the pre-soak and the pre-boiling, this one looks a little bit different. Still just so beautiful, you guys. Wonderful, wonderful soup. And the wonderful thing about that 50% solids and 50% clear fluids is that you can do it at that reduced time that I told you. For PC, again, pints are 60 minutes and quarts are 70 minutes. But that rule is really important to follow. That 50-50 rule, just for safety. All right, so I am going to allow these to cool and seal overnight. And tomorrow I will remove my rings and wash up my jars and label them for storage. So I hope that you found the information useful today. I hope you enjoy the recipe. We love this soup. It's just kind of basic and wonderful. As always, thank you for spending your time again with me today. And remember, if I can, so can you. God bless you all, and happy canning, everybody.